This makes absolutely no sense at all.
As for why detention is being explored, it's just one of several ideas floated by Homeland Security officials to manage an expected increase of migrants at the border once the COVID-19 restrictions end, which have been in place for nearly 3 years and will be lifted in May. The White House did not confirm the plans, and nothing is finalized yet. California.
That's Linden Avenue. And where is it? It's over here somewhere. There it is. Got all that space right there to park scooters at. Yeah. And that one too. Why leave it in front of the wheelchair ramp? Huh? Why? You blocked that ramp right there, you bonehead.
They're never going to pay that debt off. And so it just continues on and on and on and on. And so the crisis that we see and the numbers that we see, why it's so terrible and why I'm passionate, and you'll see others here passionate about it, it's because of the human aspect of this. It's that human trafficking. It's the human misery and the suffering. And the fact that the Biden administration refuses to really acknowledge this, or they continue their policies knowing that this is, their policies are what it's encouraging, what we call pull factors. They're pulling people to the border. With that pull factor is all this misery and all this trafficking. And we've seen numbers, and we're seeing numbers in the desert and on the river that we've never seen before. The amount of migrants that are dying every single day, astronomically high, dwarfs anything that what we saw during the Trump administration. Yet, I got letters from members of Congress on the Democrat side every single day, every time a migrant died in the desert, how terrible the Trump administration was because of our policies. Yet you don't hear anything from them today.
And it's still happening.
It's happening in numbers that we've never seen before.
Chad, I want to ask you, how effective do you think, some of the southern states essentially busing some of these illegal immigrants to the northern states has been?
Yeah, so I actually think it's made a difference. It's made a difference maybe in the type of coverage and the type of attention that this administration is starting to place on this. They're still not making it a high priority. But when you have the mayor of New York City, for instance, going to El Paso, I can't recall the last time that's happened. Why would the mayor of New York go to El Paso? What is his job duty in El Paso? Well, it's because he's getting migrants being bussed up from Texas and Florida. And he's being overwhelmed, right? This idea that New York, a city of, I believe, is 9 million, maybe even higher, cannot handle 50,000 or 60,000 migrants. Yet we're asking communities of 20,000 in South Texas to take on the same number of migrants almost every month. It gives you a sense of what's going on. So this idea of not only is it Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis and others, not only is there a necessity to bus these migrants, there's nowhere else to put them in the state of Texas. They're overwhelmed. The facilities are overwhelmed, so you got to move them out. But this idea of until it shows up on people's doorstep, they're not going to pay attention. Well, I think they've proved that to be the case. New York wasn't paying attention. They weren't commenting on this. Now they are.
Chad Wolf, financial burden of illegal immigration. What are some of the major components here? And is there anything the president can do?
Well, the president can do a lot. Over the past 2 years, he has opened up that border. We have had unprecedented illegal immigration in the 2 years that he has been in office. And this is costing the American public a huge amount of money. It nets out to the American taxpayer at $151 billion a year. We lay out about $182 billion in services and benefits for illegal aliens and their dependents. They pay about $31 billion in taxes. So the American public is left on the hook for about $151 billion a year. The majority of that, by the way, comes out of state and local budgets. The federal government pays about $66 billion. State and local governments who never asked for this, who have no control over the border, they are the ones that are picking up most of the cost for education, for healthcare, for the essential daily human services that are provided to illegal aliens and their families.
Ira, so you have the tax implications, which are obviously significant. What are the impacts of illegal immigration on, say, wages and job opportunities for American workers?
Well, obviously, the law of supply and demand can't be repealed even by the president or Congress. If you flood the labor market with a lot of workers, and it particularly hurts workers at the lower skill levels of our labor force, it drives down wages. If you are going to bring in lots of people whose skills match people who are already struggling to keep their heads above water in this economy, then it is going to make it even more difficult for them to get the wages they need to take care of their families. So it disproportionately impacts poorer Americans. You know, the president keeps telling us that he's the champion of the working class American, but what he is doing in immigration policy is precisely the opposite. He is putting them further behind the eight ball here because, it's not people sitting on Wall Street who are competing for jobs with the illegal aliens who are coming across. It's the people working in blue-collar jobs, the ones who are already struggling, and this is just making it so much worse.
What are some of the major consequences of actually not addressing the fiscal burden of illegal immigration?
Well, obviously, you have state and local governments now that are struggling to make ends meet. You know, California just had to cut its budget by, I think, 3.5% for this coming fiscal year. And yet, you have states like California that continue to offer new benefits and new services to illegal aliens. So while the federal government is responsible primarily, you do have state and local governments that have decided they're going to be sanctuaries for illegal aliens, they're going to protect people, and in addition, they're going to offer benefits and services that really aren't essential. Increasingly, states are offering in-state tuition benefits at public universities and colleges for illegal aliens. California, it wants to extend Medi-Cal, which is essentially the state version of Medicaid, to every illegal alien in the state. So they keep piling on the burdens. And it's not surprising that California, by far, has the greatest share of the burden. So it just makes it more difficult for these already struggling localities to provide the basic services that citizens require right now.
Ira Melman, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate your perspective.
These things sitting here, they could be parked out there. I mean, why leave it? I mean, seriously. There's a perfect example of where to park one. And across the street. Out of the way. Clear of the walking space. Flatliners. Somebody's gonna get hurt. This is Ponce Leon and Monroe. Piedmont Monroe. What's the address on this thing? 470. Ponce Leon. 470.
Changes were made. They tried to overwork the workers and the trains, and that's how you get a faulty axle and a lack of hazardous designation. Epoch Times' Joshua Phillip has done some excellent reporting on this. I encourage you to watch his show. Less than 2 months before this derailment, rail unions were threatening to strike, warning about potential disasters. And Congress voted to block the strike, and Biden signed it. He made a rail strike illegal. This lies at the desk of congressional Democrats and Joe Biden in his successful attempt to silence rail workers' concerns, as well as caving to railroad lobbying efforts back in the 2014-2015 years in the Obama era. Major media is not reporting on this other than Epoch and NTD. This, ladies and gentlemen, is why for this feeble administration, it is Ukraine first and America last. I'm Bo, and that's the show.
Southern CEO Alan Shaw.
I want to begin today by expressing how deeply sorry I am for the impact this derailment has had on the residents of East Palestine and the surrounding communities.
Norfolk Southern facing scrutiny since last month's derailment of dozens of cars on the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, some carrying toxic chemicals. Days later, a controlled burn of vinyl chloride to prevent an explosion sent flames and smoke into the sky. That prompted the evacuation of thousands of residents. Today, a local emergency official said that Norfolk Southern was absent at critical meetings about that planned release.
I think this confusion was probably a result of a lack of communication from Norfolk Southern.
Residents in East Palestine remain concerned about their health following the chemical exposure.
I can share some good news with you.
During the hearing, EPA officials said testing so far shows only low levels of hazardous chemicals known as dioxins.
Senator,
For his part, Shaw promised some specific safety changes and pledged to send the community more than $20 million.
just this week, we announced several new initiatives to enhance safety, which included more hot box detectors across our network, partnering with other railroads to share best practices.
the devil is in the details.
Senator Bernie Sanders accused the company of putting profits over safety and its workers' rights.
Will you make that commitment right now to guarantee paid sick days to all of your workers? That's not a radical demand. It really is not. Will you make that commitment, sir? Senator,
I share your focus on our employees. I will commit to continuing to discuss with them important quality of life issues with our local craft colleagues.
with all due respect, you sound like a politician here, Mr. Shaw.
This week, the National Transportation Safety Board launched a special investigation line in recent years. Senators say they want safer railroads and are pushing for bipartisan legislation to regulate an industry they say enjoys lavish benefits. That includes Ohio's J.D. Vance, a Republican who's become an unlikely ally with Ohio's other senator, Democrat Sherrod Brown. They're working on a bill calling for more inspection and tougher fines.
This is an industry that enjoys special subsidies that almost no industry enjoys. This is an industry that enjoys special legal carve-outs that almost no industry enjoys.
Today, the Norfolk Southern CEO stopped short of endorsing that legislation. For a closer look at these issues and the investigation into Norfolk Southern, we're joined by Jennifer Homendy, chair of the National Transportation Safety Board. Thank you for being with us. And have you, in your investigation, been able to determine why Norfolk Southern has had so many derailments of late, especially in Ohio?
Yeah, Ohio is something, we actually looked at the record of some of the major freight railroads in Ohio, and it's interesting to note that CSX operates twice the track mileage as Norfolk Southern, but Norfolk Southern has a greater number of accidents per 1,000 miles. Each of these accidents are very different. We are investigating 6 now involving Norfolk Southern, and we'll review a 7th one that occurred back in October. That's a lot in a short period of time, but it's tough to say there's a commonality among all of them because they're all very different.
Sanction China on this, right? China destroyed the economies of people, of countries all over the planet, and everyone should be upset about this, and everyone should be trying to hold China accountable. And if we all get together around the world and acknowledge that they did this and that they caused us, our health and our jobs and the education of our children and all these other things, I think that we can come together and China could be properly punished for this.
Congressman, I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you about the vaccines.
Yeah.
There's a lot of concern over the side effects. You also a medical doctor. How are you viewing this right now?
Well, I'm viewing this as the fact that, I've been saying this all along. This should have been a personal decision for each and every American to make on their own. They should have went into this knowing that this was a vaccine that was being utilized under emergency youth authorization rules, essentially an experimental vaccine that we had no data on, no long-term data whatsoever. And we still don't have any long-term data. So I don't know what the long-term consequences of this are. I don't know if it's going to be dangerous in the long term for women that become pregnant. I don't know if it's going to affect the fertility of women that want to get pregnant. I don't know if it's going to continue to cause spikes in myocarditis in young, healthy males. I know that some of that stuff has been going on. We need to know. We don't know, and the fact that they forced this vaccine on large parts of our U.S. population via mandates in the healthcare industry and in the military, and really forced it on a lot of people in other ways. People that had the choice of losing their job or getting vaccinated. This is a complete travesty. This was medical malpractice, and we need to get to the bottom of it. And we just don't have those answers yet. And the fact that they're wanting to give it to children right now, it makes me incredibly upset. There is absolutely, positively no reason to give this vaccine to a young, healthy child. They do not have a high risk of hospitalization, illness, and certainly not of death. And there's no reason to be giving this vaccine, which is still being used in an experimental context under emergency use authorization, to young, healthy children. And that's just another indication of how far off our public health authorities in this country have become. People in this country have no trust or confidence in the public health sector at all anymore. And that's gonna be a problem for us in the future.
Texas Congressman Ronnie Jackson, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Steve. Thank you.
To continue joint distribution of Call of Duty with Microsoft.
In my opinion, Sony should be absolutely terrified.
Gaming streamer Jennifer Tan, who plays Call of Duty 8 hours a day, thinks Microsoft is using minimal effort to fix the game.
Microsoft is going to focus on microtransactions. We all know I love those. Instead of the actual integrity of fixing the game. Fix your bugs. Fix the crashing. Fix loading spawns. Fix your game before you start taking over other people's platforms. End of story. I'm terrified for them.
Sony's worried about things such as releasing a buggier version of Call of Duty on the Sony PlayStation 4 and 5, taking too long to fix bugs on Sony's version, and not invest as much money or time into Call of Duty's multiplayer Sony experience. The Federal Trade Commission has filed a legal challenge against Microsoft's acquisition of Activision, saying the deal could enable Microsoft to suppress its competitors. Tan is worried about the overall future of Microsoft gaming experiences.
Where are you investing in? Is it just another way to get your exclusive titles like Gears of War, for example, which is a Microsoft exclusive title? Are you going to be moving that over to Sony now? Is that where we're going? Is it just another platform to get exclusives, or are you going to take Sony exclusives and get those onto Microsoft? And if so, are you going to keep the integrity of those games? Like, what is your end game here?
The hostility's gotten to the point that Sony's CEO reportedly told Activision, "I don't want a new Call of Duty deal. I just want to block your merger." That's according to the tweet by Activision's CCO. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
And 15th Street and continue.
I'll be there.
5th Street.